Welcome to the Path of Least Expectance podcast. I'm your host, Michaela, and today I'm so excited to have one of my closest friends with me, Mr. J.C. Schuster. He was born and raised in Dallas, Texas, a performer and choreographer with over 19 years of experience in the entertainment industry. His professional career started back at 14, and this is where our lives connected. We were in a touring off-Broadway international dance company, tap dance company, and we toured together. He then moved to LA and then to New York, and that's really where his TV, film, theatrical chapter started. He's been on everything, film, television. Some of his credits include Fosse, Annie, HBO's Vinyl, Glee, Gossip Girl. Broadway credits include Fiddler on the Roof and the SpongeBob SquarePants musical, which we'll get into later. JC has had opportunities to work with Madonna, Keith Urban, Good Morning America, Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon, Tony Awards, Macy's Thanksgiving Parade, just to name a few. We could go on and on and on and on. So talented. And you're a choreographer, all sorts of things. So he really is one of my dearest friends and a new dad to the sweetest little boy, Kay. So fatherhood is new to him, which we'll talk about too. Married to an angel, Allison, who I give it to her because I don't know how she deals with you on a regular basis. But let's get into it. The one, the only vaudeville boy, JC. Welcome to the podcast.
Oh my gosh, I'm going to kill you. First off, you did not tell me you were going to read that. And one of the things that I always talk about is I hate sitting there when people like read my bio.
Well, luckily you only will see it if you're watching it on YouTube. Most people will not see how awkward you were on the podcast.
As I was just like, hi, you guys. I am so excited, Michaela. Thank you for having me on this. I've listened to your episodes and I'm just super excited. I'm super excited to be sitting here with you, just chatting about life and love and the entertainment industry, or shall I say, the crazy entertainment industry.
Yes, the wild world of entertaining. Okay, so I always tell people, go back as far as you want. It's your path of least expectance. So where did your path start? I mean, you could start with dance. You could start before that. I actually don't know how you got involved with dance. I'm assuming it was your older sister, but I don't really know the story.
Yeah, so it was kind of interesting. I grew up, my mom's pretty artistic and she loves directing and stuff like that. But my sister just went to dance class and I was the younger brother that just showed up and was at the dance studio when my sister was taking class. And so
hiding in the dressing rooms, annoying the crap out of everybody.
Yeah.
See, I can see it.
And I remember the studio director basically approached my mom and was like, hey, we're going to put together just this boys dance class. I think it was like hip hop or something like that. And so I tried that and I ended up really loving it. I had done some community theater as like a child, just because, again, my mom was a director and stuff like that. And so I just kind of fell in love with it at a young age. I was probably about 8 years old. And then it just kind of progressed and kept going. And next thing I know, I was on a competition team at the dance studio. My sister at this point had completely just kind of, she had just kind of given it up. She like did cheerleading and some other stuff like that. And so I just kept doing it. And it was this kind of this valley that just kind of opened. And I was like, boom, we're going right there. That's what we're going to do. And just one thing led to another. And next thing you know, I was in a full dance competition team and just one thing led to another. So I basically, from the young age, I knew that I wanted to be a dancer and I kind of just followed that path. And then that led me to moving to LA in 2009. If we rewind, I was in a band in high school. And so I love singing, I love dancing. And I was like, I'm going to go to LA and I'm going to chase this crazy dream. And so
I went part of your life. How did I not know this? I was part of that part of your life. And I did not know you went to LA to be in a band. With who?
Yeah. With my buddy, Mike Manning.
With Mike?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We had this band growing up. It was called Clear Cut. And
maybe I remember this. I don't know.
And so that's what I was like doing in Dallas, but I was still teaching dance here and I was like doing these things because that was like how I was making money. Is I kind of went from being a dance student to a dance teacher here in Texas. And then in about 2009 is when I decided I'm going to LA. I'm going to just kind of like do music and do dance and do everything. And that's kind of really where I made that first leap of like, I'm going into this industry. I'm going to try this out. I'm going to see what happens. And that's really kind of where the door opens into a whole new world of this is my career. And I think the coolest thing was, that was a big decision, not just for myself, but for my parents too, because at that time I just decided I don't think I'm going to do the college thing. I was touring with you at the time, and I was just kind of making money as a dancer. And so I was like, you know what? This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to try it out. And I kind of, in the back of my mind, was like, there's nothing else. Like everybody always talks about like a fallback situation.
Right.
And for me, it was like, I'm opening the door and I'm not stepping through it. I'm running through it, and let's just see where it goes.
Yeah, and well, that's definitely the kind of attitude you have to have in that world, or forget it,
Yeah.
or you get eaten up alive. The first step in the door, it's like the crocodiles come out of nowhere and just devour you.
Yeah.
So wait, so what
100%.
happened? Do we have a demo tape for this band?
I mean, we definitely have, there's
Do we have a
definitely some
music video?
music. I mean, I don't,
Don't
we
act like you
filmed
don't
some music
know.
video. No, no, I'm telling you, listen, we filmed some music videos, but like YouTube was not a
Yeah,
thing. Instagram was not a
you
thing.
said what, 2009? So yeah, so none of it.
Yeah. 2009, I moved to LA, but really like when I got there, we were like trying to do music. Then my buddy went on tour with another artist, and I kind of went down the get an agent,
Mm-hmm.
start doing the whole professional dance world side of things. And so just kind of naturally, just kind of things kind of just split, and it just started kind of, I wouldn't say it was like the perfect, like LA was the perfect thing, but it really prepped me for the move to New York in 2011, which is really where things started to take off in my career.
So in LA, what was your favorite job you ever did? Or like what was the job that you did and you were like, I am doing big things. Like, or at least like at the time you thought that. And maybe you still think that. Maybe it still was like a big job, or maybe you look back and you're like, "Oh my god."
Well, I'll tell you this. I worked at a tanning salon in LA, okay?
Again, I had no idea.
because listen, when you are an artist
Mm-hmm.
and you are, it is that feast or famine. I love to talk about like,
Sacrifice.
yeah, and there are jobs where 1 minute you are at like the top of the world, and then the next month you're basically eating ramen noodles and pulling pennies together to pay your rent.
Right.
But probably my favorite job that I did in LA was, I mean, I think it was probably my biggest job up to that point, but at the time, Glee was massive.
Yeah, yeah.
And our good friend, our good mutual friend, Brittany Parks, was a big part of Glee. And so I had the opportunity to work on that show. And it was super cool to be um, on that, excuse me, to be on that as a tap dancer. I got to tap on it. And I got into the industry kind of, as a tap dancer, the
And which,
professional industry.
if you don't know, tap dancing, there are like probably one to two jobs every 7 years for a tap
Yeah.
dancer. So when you get a tap dance job, it's like you are flying high.
Yeah, and that was my love. Like tap dancing was really like my love as a kid getting into it. So definitely I would have to say my favorite job in LA was working on that and just having that experience at the height of Glee. And I was on it for like, I think the job was like a 2 day job. But
Right.
at that age, you are just like, you're ready and you're like, okay. And and again, like these things happen and you're like, I'm on the right path. Okay,
Right.
this is happening.
The
And I think
reassurance.
that's, yeah, and I think that's the hardest thing, especially when you first start into the industry. I call it 1,000 no's, right? You're going to get 1,000
At
no's
least.
before you get a one big yes.
Right.
And you just kind of have to be prepared to take that on, and that it weighs on people. The thousand no's, sometimes that's the alligator that eats and chews people out. And sometimes people go and they just like they get 10 no's and they're like, I'm not meant for this.
Well,
And
and
so
that's
I
the
just
make
kind
and
of was
break of
like,
life, you know?
yeah,
Like, that's,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And so I was just, getting no's, tanning people, having fun. Boom.
I'm like slightly concerned that I like didn't know one you were in this band, and maybe I didn't. I just have a terrible memory, but I have a really good memory, and that you were working in a tanning salon during all of this. And I mean, like when we came to visit you in LA, you weren't working at the tanning salon, right?
No, I mean, I worked at the tanning salon for maybe like 6, 7 months,
It paid
and
the
and
bills.
I got spray tanned once because they used to make us like try everything to make it, and I got spray tanned.
Uh-huh.
And I think that they pulled a joke on me because when I came
They're
out,
like,
I was
turn.
I was 30 shades darker.
What was it? Is it a Friends episode? No, what is the episode where they're like turn and then they turn and then it sprays the same
Yeah.
side and then they're like turn and then it sprays the same side? That was you. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Okay, so before I lose this train of thought, I was gonna say before the tanning bed story, like what you were saying, if it doesn't challenge you, it won't change you. So I feel like, I mean,
Mm,
I love that, because it's like if you didn't go through all of those things, all of those no's, all of those jobs that weren't great, you're never gonna get to the
yeah.
jobs that are great.
Yeah. And I
It's never
also
gonna
feel
change
like
you.
yeah, and also like talking about change, like I also feel if you're not changing, you're not pushing yourself either,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so, or you're not pushing yourself hard enough. And I constantly feel like, especially like in the industry, there's so much that you have to change, and there's so much that you have to kind of revamp yourself and kind of go, okay, where am I going in this industry? Because there's so many different routes you can go. You can be a dancer, you can be a choreographer, you can do both. But a lot of times there's these things that happens and you have to focus on one thing.
Yeah.
And you go down that path and you realize, okay, this is not working right now. I have to change, and I have to change quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And you're playing these roles, you're playing these parts. And that's one of the biggest things is the no's really built me and changed me, so I was prepared and I was ready for the yeses to step up and
Mm-hmm.
say, this is it, let's go. And so that's really what happened is I had an opportunity to move to New York in 2011 with my two roommates, and this was just a fun thing. And I always joke about I was the Texan that was like, "Oh, I'm never moving to the big city. I'm never doing this." And then I get to the city,
And you loved
and
it.
I fell in love with
It
it.
took JC the 4 or 5 years that I lived there that he would come visit and stay and tell me how much he would never live there. It took for me to move, for him to I moved from New York, for him to move to New York like maybe 2 or 3 months later.
Yeah,
It was really great. Yeah.
I
And
know
then he fell in
that.
love.
Yeah, then I fell in love with
Mm-hmm.
the city and with a girl. I'm like, but it's crazy because when I got to New York City, we had the coolest experience ever. Just three young professional friends working in the city. We were young, and my buddies all of a sudden were like, okay, our jobs are over. We're headed back to LA. And that was one of those like points where I could have gone back to LA. I was familiar with it. I had my two friends. We were going to be roommates, but things were starting to happen in New York City and doors were starting to open. That was one of those decisions where I sat there and I was like, okay, I can take the comfortable path, go back to LA. My agency is in LA. We also had a office in New York, but I was like, I could go back and just go back to what I was doing. It was comfortable, it was good. But for some reason, the change of staying by myself in this big city, just being, trying to fight off all the alligators that we're talking about,
You took the path of
that
least expectance, is what you did. That's
a
exactly what you
hundred
did.
percent. And I felt this calling, I felt this tug on my heart to go, don't go back. Because if you go back, it's not like necessarily I'm walking backwards, but I wanted I wanted the change to propel me forward. And I wanted a little bit of that unknown. And I wanted a little bit of that hard, like, no, I have to figure this out. I have to do that. And so I decided to stay in 2011. And that's when like everything just like opened up to a whole new world. And then now all of a sudden I'm doing auditions where I sing at. Well, I'm a singer, right? And then I'm a dancer. And so now these two worlds have combined again from being a kid and being in a band. And now all of a sudden these worlds are colliding, and I'm in these auditions doing two things that I love, putting me onto the path of musical theater and Broadway,
And
you know?
Broadway.
So,
When it's
yeah.
like, what you were saying earlier about like adapting, and
Mm-hmm.
it's almost like I've never really thought about it this way before, but like as you're talking, it's making me think it's almost like it's like a quality that you have to work towards. Like it's one of those things where you learn to ride a bike, you learn to tie your shoes, you learn to adapt, and until you can
Mm-hmm.
learn like to do that and do it well, like you were
Mm-hmm.
pushed so hard in LA, and then when you got to New York and you were thrown into this world of change, but you knew how to adapt and you knew how to like change and pivot or whatever to each situation. And it's almost like that was like level unlocked, like okay, now I can adapt.
Yeah.
It's not going to
Yeah.
make it any easier, but like I know what I'm doing and I have the confidence to keep going.
Yeah. And it's interesting because it's like I heard something once that says like to get something you never had, you have to do something
You've never
you've never
done.
done.
Mm-hmm.
And
My
it's so
workout teacher says
true.
it all the time. As I'm like sweating, she's like, if you want what most people don't have, you got to do what most people won't do.
But it's like it's true of
It
like,
is. It is.
and I've always I was never one to go, uh, my path has always been unexpected. And in the industry of the feast and famine, you never know which way you're going to go. But I was always on the line of like going, okay, I'm going to do this, I'm going to try this, and being my true and authentic self.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the craziest part, is here's this Texas boy that is a dancer, shows up to New York City and is like, I'm going to be on Broadway. That was never a dream of mine,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, I enjoyed singing. I wanted to be in a band and I wanted that career to go well. And then I moved to LA and I realized, oh, wait, I'm going to go down the dance path. And I get to LA and that is the path that I went down. And then I get to New York City and all of a sudden musical theater pops right in front of me. And I'm like, oh, this is actually where I'm supposed to
You're
be,
connecting the
what I'm,
dots. Mm-hmm.
yeah.
I love
And,
that.
and, and each thing was completely, they were in the entertainment industry, but they were completely different.
Mm-hmm.
And I always joke about one of my like first auditions, was actually my first, would end up to be my first Broadway show, but it was an off Broadway audition. And so I show up, the boys had left. I'm like, okay, I'm in this world. I'm just like, I'm on like
Your roommates had left.
backpage.com. Yeah, my roommates
Yeah.
had left. And I'm like, on all these websites of like trying to find auditions. It was so much different back then than it is now. I mean, I
Right.
did have an agent, they would call me, but you're also just like hustling to find these
Well, and you
auditions.
were new, so you were not probably top of their list yet. You hadn't made
Yeah.
any
Oh,
money
no, no,
yet,
no. I
so.
was, yeah, yeah, I was like, so I show up to this audition for a show called Soul Doctor that was happening at New York Theater Workshop. And it was just an off Broadway theater, super small. And I show up and I remember walking into the audition and I like sit down and everybody is in khaki pants and a red shirt. And I was like, and I'm in cowboy boots, torn jeans, and like a flannel,
What is
and
the
like right. And
don't
so
be
I'm like,
suspicious, don't be suspicious.
so I'm like, I'm scrolling down, and I get to the bottom of the email, and it's like,
Ugh.
please wear khaki pants and a red shirt. And I'm like, oh gosh. So I walk into
Does
the
not take
audition.
instructions well.
So I walk into the audition and I walk in true JC form. The first thing I do is I crack a joke. I was like, "Hey guys, sorry. So like I just read like when the email was, what I needed to prepare, and I showed up. I was like, I'm so sorry. Like this is just kind of what I was wearing, and I didn't see the part about the khaki pants and the red shirt.
Which they
And
easily could have been like, okay, then you can leave.
yeah, but then the guy behind it was like, "Oh no, that don't stress about that." And they were like, "What do you have to sing?" And it was
Wow.
like not not like what they wanted. They wanted like some ballad, and I probably was like singing Billy Joel, Piano Man, because it was like
Vaudeville
my
boy.
only yeah, I was vaudeville boy, something crazy. But what I realized is after I booked the job, and I realized after that the associate choreographer like came up to me, and he actually ended up being like one of my close friends in New York City. He said, honestly, JC, like when you walked in, you like were just so fresh. You were just joking about it. And he was like, so many people in our industry are just trying to be the same, right? They're walking in, they're trying to be this, they're trying to be that. And you walked in and you were just JC. And ever since he said that, I honestly just was like, I just need to be myself,
Yeah. Wow.
because this is a world where everybody is trying to walk in. They're in the leotard, they're in the tights, the hair's pulled back, the red lipstick's on. We're trying to be this perfect musical theater person. And, I just kind of said, I'm going to roll with, I'm JC, the guy who's in jeans and cowboy boots, who walks in there, who sings different songs, who tries different things, strong and wrong. And if the job's not right for me, I'm not going to get it.
Right. And that's the thing. It's like, and I'm learning too that, of course, there's sometimes you have to do things that aren't perfect and that don't fall perfectly in your alignment. But that being
Right.
said, I do think that, like what you just said, if it wasn't the right fit, then you don't need to be there because it's not going to
Mm,
bring you joy and it's not going to push you further in life. It's not going to get you closer to where you need to be, that higher level of like, happiness or of success, because it's not falling, you're doing all these things that don't add up to where you need to be, right? And so,
yeah.
like you said, by putting yourself in this red lipstick that's not you, of course you have to do some things sometimes that aren't you, but if
Right.
you can do more of the where it is you and your authentic self, that's going to get you so much further in life.
And there's a freedom. There's a
Yeah.
freedom when you release the pressure of trying to conform to what other people are doing. And I see it now, especially in a world of like YouTube and Instagram and all this
Yes.
is, and this is what I tell people who are trying to get into my industry. I'm like, you have to be you, and you just have to be the best version of yourself, but also realize that the best version of yourself will fall short in certain circumstances, and that's okay. And I think what that did for me is when I would go in there, I would just be JC. I would look them in the eye when I would sing auditions. Most of the time, people sing over their head. They just pretend that they're on stage. When I would go in there, I would look people in their eyes and I would just be like JC singing.
Mm-hmm.
And when I left, I wouldn't contact my agent and be like, okay, how'd it go? I wouldn't check my email and waiting, am I going to get a call back? Am I going to do this? Because I knew I went in there. I was my true authentic self.
And that brought you
I would,
confidence. You were confident because you were
yeah,
in that position.
yep. I brought something different, or what I thought was my different. So I brought my different into the room. And when I left, it's called leave and forget. So I would leave and then I would go on with my life and I would do other things. And then if I got a call, awesome. But so many times I feel like we worry about things that are so small that it it takes up space. And then when something actually happens, we don't have enough in our reserve about things that are serious because
Mm-hmm.
we've worried so much about the tiny little things, about like this job or that job or this dinner or this podcast that we have to, record or this or that.
Mm-hmm.
And just going and saying, I'm just going to be myself. And if I'm meant for the job, awesome. And if I'm not, then I wasn't supposed to be a part of it anyways.
Yeah. But see, I feel like you're so good at being you too. And you've always been that way. And that's what's so like infectious about you, I feel like, one of my favorite stories, and I don't know why this one always stands out. Cause I mean, gosh, we traveled everywhere together. I mean, all over the world, all over
Mm-hmm.
the country, like with this tag
Yeah.
group, we would go travel on the weekends and we'd have different shows in different cities. And we were flying together and we were together a lot. And I think it was in Mexico, and we were on a tour bus. And so JC also, as much as I love you, like can drive you nuts. Like JC can drive anyone up the wall, back down again, and around the corner. Like
Yeah.
sometimes you're just a lot. So we would get on this tour bus every morning and we would go to a different city to perform, right? And I remember one morning on this tour bus, we were all so tired. I mean, God knows what time it was, probably like 6 a.m. We'd had a show the night before. Nobody wanted to be on the tour bus, but we were on there. So JC gets out his laptop and is blaring this song that is, what is it, Bass Hunter?
Yeah.
Like this song.
Now you're gone.
It's obnoxious. It's right, and he would play it every morning on the bus as loud as he could, and he would dance up and down the aisles, and he would just. But you bring so much joy, and as much as I want to be mad at you, and we want to be like sit down, we can't because you're so full of life and you're so JC. And that's so, I mean, honestly, it's so refreshing that you can do that. Like, it's hard for most of us, like you said, like you just show up and you're JC. It is not easy for some of us to show up and be Michaela, So what's some advice? I mean, what do you is there anything you can advice you can give on how to just really find your true self? I mean, are there any things that you've stuck by in life that have helped you kind of stay true to that?
First off, thank you for saying that. Thank you for saying I am crazy. Imagine being married to me. My
I
wife
can't.
also
But
laughs about it
okay,
too.
but I will say one of my favorite people in the world. I give you a really hard time, but if you weren't like that, I would be very upset about it.
Thank you.
If you showed up and you weren't taking my kid through Harris Teeter, swinging him around,
yeah.
breaking things, I would be upset.
Advice that I would give to people, I will also say this, and I always try to tell people this whether I'm at a Q&A at a college or in at a dance studio or on this podcast right now. So many things in life, they look right. Like even hearing me speak on this podcast, you would think, oh my gosh, listen to what that guy, listen to his, resume, all the things he's saying right now are so spot on in this and that. But you have to remember that we are all human and we all struggle with things, right? There are things that I struggle with too, of am I doing the right thing? Is this the right thing? Worrying about things like the advice that I just gave about not worrying about the small things. It is so easy to give advice and not take your own advice.
Right, yeah.
And I think reminding yourself all the time of who you are and that who you are doesn't lie in what you do, right? I constantly, and during the pandemic, this was a huge eye-opening experience. I'm in New York City. I'm at the height of my career. I'm married. I'm having the best. Everything is just glitter and
JC's wife is also an amazing performer. So you guys were both all of a sudden hit with this pandemic.
Yeah. So we're hit with this massive pandemic, and I had been in New York maybe 9.5 years. Allison had been there 16 years. So we had already been talking about leaving New York City, and all of a sudden pandemic hits, and it's almost like, boom, this is the time, let's go. The industry had shut down. Well, we came back to Texas where my family is. And I went through, like a lot of people, I went through probably one of the hardest times in my life because I didn't realize how much of my identity I put into what I was doing. Mm-hmm. And there was this incredible but hard journey of realizing and learning that my identity is not in what I do, it's in who I am. And so even though I'm saying some of these things now of being JC and doing this and doing that, I'm learning that on a different level right
Mm-hmm.
now of like, I had lost part of who I was, but I didn't realize that how much I had
Mm-hmm.
put myself in what I do in the industry. And then here I am, world flipped upside down, going through a midlife crisis, kind of going, okay, what do I do now? What do I do from here? I really instantly was like, you have to remember who you are, that your identity does not lie in what you do or the relationship that you're in, or, that you have to be okay with yourself and you have to really find out what do I have to offer just in relationships and in life.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can figure that out, and if you can figure out, okay, this is who I am, and this is what I have to offer to myself first, and then to others, I think it completely opens up this new world of, okay, and this is what I have to offer in a work and like in the world
Personal environment,
outside of,
yeah.
yeah, personal environment.
It's so true. And like, so I saw this thing the other day that made me laugh. It was like, not everybody's gonna like you,
Mm,
and you're not gonna like anybody. I mean, and you're not gonna like
yeah,
everybody, which is so true. It's like, no, not everybody likes you, but you don't like everybody. So like, why should everybody
yeah,
like you? And so it's like, you don't have to make everybody happy because
mm-mm,
not everybody's gonna make you happy, and that's
right,
okay. Like when we think about it that way, it's like, oh yeah, you're right. Like I'm definitely a people pleaser. Like I like people to be happy. I like them to
yeah,
be like give me approval of things. I like to do things
yeah,
the right way. But and so when people don't, I'm always like, why? Why don't they like me? Why don't they
mm,
like what I'm doing? Why wasn't it enough? And it's like, well, you know what? It's not always going to be enough for everybody, and that's okay
yeah,
because not everybody gives me enough. And I sit back and I'm like, oh, okay,
yeah,
that's just not for me. So like, they're probably doing the same thing. They're like, oh, Michaela's great, but she's just not for me, and that's
right.
okay. When I think about it that way, it's like a lot easier to handle. You know?
Yeah. And I think going off of what you're saying, the second piece of advice that I would give people, whether it's work, relationships, whatever it is, some of the best piece of advice that I've ever been given is let go to fully embrace. And when I first heard that, I didn't really understand it until I moved and let go of
When you didn't
that
have a
old
choice.
life. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I realized that even though I had moved to Dallas and even though we had made this decision as a family to have kids and to switch into a different side of our careers in the entertainment industry, I didn't realize how much I was still holding on to the past. I didn't realize how much I was holding on to that lifestyle of being on shows and the grind and all that. And then I heard this and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't really fully embrace this next chapter, this next book of my life without letting go of the last one. And I think also with the book thing, right? Like so many people think that our life is one book. So you always hear people say, okay, well, this is a different chapter
Mm-hmm.
of my book, my story.
Mm-hmm.
I think our lives are it's a series
A
of
series
books.
of books. You're so true. That's so
And,
true.
and I honestly think that when we left New York in the pandemic, I had shut that book, but I was trying to rewrite chapters in that book while also trying to write the new book. And I'm like, I've closed that. I can't open this other one and start writing
That
these
is such a good
chapters.
analogy, JC. Like I need to sit with that for a minute. Like I just need to like process that because it's so good. Like that is so good. Write it down. You need to do a blog on it or something.
But it's like it's
Yes.
true. It's like I can't open this new book and write new chapters in this new book when I'm trying to write ones in an old one that are already shut, that
Mm-hmm.
I've already decided to leave. And I think that's it. It's like let go to fully embrace and trust yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's the wrong decision, you have to go down that road to know if it's actually the wrong decision.
And I had a guest on the other week, and she said she had heard something where it said "let go or be dragged," And it's so
Mm.
true. So it's like the same thing as what you were just saying, a different way to say it. Like you either have to let go or be dragged down this path you don't want to go down.
Yeah. And sometimes there's two decisions and you have no idea what to do. And we face this so many times in life and relationships and work. But I truly think if you just trust yourself, seek wise counsel. I always think that's a great thing, but also be careful, right? Like, be careful who you are seeking counsel from and the people that you surround yourself with. Really reflect on the decisions that you're going to make. But ultimately, even if somebody says, I think you're making the wrong decision, if you think you're making the right decision, you have to make that decision
Mm-hmm.
and you have to commit to it.
Yeah.
Because if you don't commit to it, you'll never know if you made the right or wrong decision. And there was this crazy experience. I'll quickly tell you a story. There was this crazy experience in my industry that I finally realized this. And I was up for my second Broadway show, and I went and I auditioned, and I was getting offered a what we call swing contract. So it basically means I cover a bunch of people on the show. And it was for a huge show, and it was for big name directors, choreographers, all this. And when that came on my plate, I was up for SpongeBob. Now, SpongeBob was not guaranteed to be a Broadway show. I was not guaranteed a contract yet. I was just auditioning for the show that I did not realize was going to be this incredible, right? Like a lot of people, I thought SpongeBob, it's a cartoon. Is it going to
Yeah.
be like, all this? I got a call from my agents and they're like, you got this swing contract on Broadway. Congratulations. That's it. And I was like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. I hung up the phone and instantly I was hit with, I don't think I want to take this contract.
Mm-hmm.
I think I want to continue auditioning for this because this is an on-stage role. It's with a crazy out there show that seems so wacky and fun, and it
So
seems
you.
so me. So I called my agents and I said, I would like for you to turn down the
They
contract.
loved that, didn't they?
My agents thought I was crazy.
Yeah.
And they really did. They said, JC, oh, we want you to take 24 hours. We want you to think about this. So I hung up the phone. I slept on it. My Allison, I believe, we weren't even engaged yet. So she was my girlfriend at the time. She was like, are you sure everybody wants this job? Everybody wants to do this. And I just had this like feeling of like, I just want to try. I want to go for this and I want to do it. So I called them back the next morning. I said, turn it down. And I remember my agents looking at me and saying, I'm just preparing you that the casting director, the director, the choreographer, the whole production team, they may not, other shows down the road, people work on things. And this may kind of put that little like, orange flag or red
It's that
flag.
cliche, that you see like in all the theater movies where it's like the one who turned down the job or who like disappointed the director. That was you.
Yeah. And
Uh-huh.
so I went down this path, and my final callback for SpongeBob, I was literally like, I've never prayed so hard in my life because I was like, I need to do this. So I walked in
Mm-hmm.
there and I just was JC and I wanted that job and I booked it.
Yeah.
And I went off to Chicago. I did the out of town tryout, and in between the out of town tryout and Broadway, there was about a 6 minute, because normally they have to find a theater, they put these things in between the out of town tryout in Chicago and SpongeBob going on Broadway. I got a call from the original show that said, we have somebody who's leaving the show. It's an on stage track. Do you want the contract? And I said yes. And the craziest thing is now I'm in the show on stage doing the show every single night, and a show that I thought that I was going to be blacklisted from, a show that I thought, I've upset this director, I've upset this thing. They kind of looked at it like, hey, he just made a professional decision. It worked out for him. We would still really like him to come. And I got to do both. And in that moment, I thought I was making the wrong decision, but I was like, I have to make this decision because I feel like it's the right decision. And in return, I got to do,
You got both. You got double.
I got double. And if I
Gosh.
had just done that first one, I probably wouldn't have done SpongeBob.
Right.
And so I just kind of look at it like, and those were the next two Broadway credits in my career. And a lot of people were like, I don't know. And so, and it doesn't always work out like that. Trust me, there's other
Right.
decisions that
But
we've all
it
made.
does. Sometimes it does, and I think that we're so quick to be like, "Oh, no. It would never work out in our favor. I'm just going to
Yeah.
take the traditional route and it's going to be fine. It's never going to work out in my favor." But I mean, if you believe it, seeing is believing. Believing is
Yeah.
seeing, whatever it is. You got
Yeah.
to believe it
And
if you want it to happen.
yeah. And you just have to believe yourself because ultimately, if you go down that path and it's the wrong path, then I truly feel you'll know and you'll go, okay, great. And you'll change because going back to, if you're not changing,
Mhm.
are we really growing?
Mhm.
And there's nothing wrong with sitting in something and doing something for long periods of time. I've just never been that type of
Mhm.
person because I constantly I want to grow and I want to go, okay, this has been really awesome. But when I get on that hamster wheel,
Mhm.
JC's brain starts going, okay, what's next? What am I going to do? How do I,
Okay, so
and
this is random, but like, have you ever been in a situation? I just think this applies to you because you are so JC and you're you and you're comfortable with who you are. Have you ever been in a situation or on a job or whatever where you weren't valued? Like, have you ever been somewhere
mm,
where you knew you weren't valued and you had to get out of there? Do you know what I mean?
yeah, yeah, it was, unfortunately one of the hard things about my career, my life is I'm injury prone. I will just say it out loud. I've had so many contracts where I had a torn hamstring or I had a torn bicep. And it's a hard thing because, right, like as dancers, it's super physical, but you're on these shows and you're doing these things. And I remember I was working on this one show and I was super excited. It was going to head, again, it was an out of town tryout and it was going to head to Broadway. And I tore my hamstring in the out of town tryouts. And usually, what in our industry, you have to go through a protocol, you have to do all this. And I was finally cleared after like 8 or 10 weeks of not being in the show. And I was ready to be put back in the show and they had kind of moved on and basically not written me out of the show, but basically was like, I didn't have a place or a purpose. And you know, we have swings on show. And so the swing was now in the show and we were going to do what was called a split track. And this happens a lot, right? It happens a lot, but I kind of realized that in that moment that I was not being valued and that I was kind of, because I was injured so long, that they had just been like, okay, we're going to move on. And I remember sitting down with someone who's very high in our industry. And this person looked at me and basically said, you know, you're really just going to have to work hard to get your job back. And I mean, JC, do you want to do this Broadway contract, right? And I remember just looking at them and I just responded because it was in that moment I didn't feel valued. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't feel I didn't
Needed.
feel like they needed. I didn't feel like they were fighting to put me back into the show. And I looked at this person and I said, if I'm not supposed to be a part of the Broadway show, then I'm not supposed to be a part of the Broadway show.
Mm-hmm.
And I can sit here confidently say that if it's not this, I'm supposed to do something else.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't like that answer because they want people to go, oh, I will do anything for this.
Yes.
I will do anything. I will do this. Please, please, please. And that's just not who I am. And so I didn't go on.
Well,
They
and you
didn't like,
really like that's hard for a lot of people. Like, luckily, you have the confidence to do that. But like, with like the value and the worth thing, like you just said, like I'm worth more than that. I'm worth more than that kind of attention that they're giving me. I saw this thing once and it was like, and I've never forgotten this. And I think about it all the time. Seriously, like in so many different situations. So you go to the vending machine and a water bottle is $1. And then you go to a baseball game and the water bottle's $5. And then you go to a birthday party and the water bottle's free, right? So you have
Yeah.
3 different prices on the same product. And all that changed was the environment.
Mm.
So if you don't like what you're worth in an environment, then change. Like if you don't like the
Mm.
value or the worth that's been put on you in whatever environment, if you're only 50 cents and you want to be $5, then remove yourself and go to where you will be valued, where you will be
Yeah.
seen for what you're worth. You know?
Yeah. And that was hard because I sat there and I was like, it's hard to do that. But
Right.
like you said, like you have to know your value. And if you're not being valued, then maybe it's not right.
Right.
And this is in relationships, this is everywhere. So sometimes the best thing is to just take yourself out of that situation. And so yeah, so I got bought out of the contract. I didn't go on, which is it's a hard thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like
And
that would
pride,
have
your
been,
pride too. You know, it's like, oh
yeah.
yeah, what
And
happened to that
also,
major show you were in? Like, what? Oh well,
yeah.
they didn't want
And then,
me.
it's like, and so then you have to explain it to people and you're like,
Yeah.
basically I was bought out, aka fired.
Right.
Right, I was fired from a show because I knew my value. They weren't respecting that, and we just didn't see eye to eye. And so I was devastated. And I remember getting a call from the casting director who cast me in that, and basically was like, I got you. I'm so sorry about what happened. I got you. And boom, he put me on another show.
You stood
And
your
so it was
ground.
like
Oh my
this.
gosh.
I stood my ground. And then I got to go work for Radio City Music Hall, which was like this crazy experience working with the Rockettes,
Oh my
something I
gosh.
never thought. And I was devastated in that moment. I was hurt. I was broken. I was questioning again, did I make the right decision? Should I have stood my ground? Should I have said these things to these people who could possibly say something bad about me to other people? Or the industry is like, who
Mm-hmm.
all this. And if you put a bad taste in somebody's mouth, unfortunately that person, and for some reason every single time that I just was like, I'm gonna stand my ground, this is what I'm gonna do, it paid off in the end.
Well, and you've always done it in a very respectful, well thought out way too, which makes a huge difference. I feel like sometimes when we're over something or when we've had enough, we're just quick to fly off the ledge and be like, that's it, I'm done. I can't handle you. You're not respecting
Right.
me. I deserve more. I'm gone. But I feel like
Yeah.
you're always so great at, which we all need to do, is just calmly looking at the
Mm.
situation, weighing our options, and if it's not right,
Yeah.
then moving on.
Yeah. It's almost like that ready, aim, fire, or on your
Mm-hmm.
mark, get set, go.
Mm-hmm.
So many times in life, we don't actually
Or as
take
my
that
son says,
process.
get set on your mark, run.
Exactly. But it's like,
Doesn't
and so
matter.
many times people are going and firing before they're even ready, set, go. The ready is, think about it. Think the set is, okay, am I prepared for what's about to happen? Is this, and then you go. And
Mm-hmm.
so many times I feel like in life that because we're all emotional people, and you should trust me. I'm a one. I'm just fully saying everybody. I'm a one,
I'm well aware. You don't have to tell me.
or I'm 100. Okay.
150.
Yeah. And when I'm a one, so many times we're going fire, ready, aim. Instead of like taking the time to assess it, taking the time to go, okay, this is what I'm feeling about this situation. And then going, okay, am I set? Is this really what I want to do? Because I'm about to do this. And then you go. But once that gun goes off and you are sprinting, finish the race. Don't run and then all of a sudden look back and go, actually, I'm going to go back to ready and set. I
Yeah.
don't know if I'm going to win the race.
Anybody have some
There's other
water?
people. Yeah. Anybody have some water?
I'm
This person's in
thirsty.
front of me running faster. I think I'm going to get third, so I might as well
Ooh.
not finish the race
Oh gosh,
rather
that
than
one
just,
hurts so much because it's so true. Oh,
instead of just
yes.
going, let me get to the finish line, see the results, and then assess what happened. And I
wild.
do it a lot. You know what I mean? I do it all the time. I
Yeah.
start running and then I like do a 360. I
Yeah.
start running the other way. And then I almost get back to the end. I'm like, what am I doing? Turn around,
So then you're,
just
yeah.
finish the race,
Yeah.
you know? And that's like,
Whew,
that's
that one's
been
good
the
too.
craziest thing.
That's so good.
Yeah.
Okay, so now let's switch gears here. Okay,
Okay.
so you come to Texas, hit with the
Mm-hmm.
pandemic, everything's halted. You and your
Yeah.
wife are almost
Yep.
like you're not displaced because you're home in Texas, but it's like kind of like you were. Like you didn't really have anything that you were like nothing was working for you. Like your
Yeah.
careers were done, nothing was working out there. You wanted to have, a child, so you made that your priority. Okay.
Yeah.
So like I don't know, like walk us through that. Like what was that like in that moment of like what were the decisions that had to be made and like what were the sacrifices that had to be made? Like I mean not in doesn't have to be intense, but just like those changes in life. Okay, so what are like I feel like you're really good at adjusting to change,
Yeah.
right? No?
No, it's interesting.
What
Again,
are you
it
gonna
goes
tell us
back to the
something that's like brutally honest or something? Like you
no,
looked at me like you were gonna like
no. It's just like I think change is difficult regardless.
Yeah.
But change can be the best thing for us all
Mm-hmm.
because it's rewriting books, it's rewriting chapters. And I think and we're still in this process. So that's the thing that I will, before I answer this question, I will let people know that sometimes things don't happen like this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in a world where everything is at our fingertips, everything is quick, we can get answers quick, we can get satisfaction fast. We can do all these things because of our phones and just because of the world. That I think what happens is so many times people go, okay, I'm gonna change, and then they get to the change and they're like, well, it's not really. And I sometimes think time is our best friends, right? Like sometimes change doesn't just happen overnight. Sometimes change happens over a couple years.
Mm-hmm.
And since July 2020, when we left, we're still in this process of changing our lives, changing our careers, and doing different things. And the hardest thing, though, is sometimes we want it now.
We always
And what
want
I
it now.
realized, yeah, you always
I
want
mean
it now, you
sometimes,
know?
always,
Yeah.
now. Yesterday.
Yeah.
Like I'd like to have already had it yesterday.
And even in having a kid, I've realized how much of life I've appreciated slowing down.
Mm-hmm.
I've appreciated the not fast change of going, okay, I'm going to go from this into this job. This is what I'm doing full time. And I think there was a part of me that was like, okay, my whole life has been up and down, contract work. What am I going to do? And then I moved to Texas and I was like, okay, I'm going to find a full time job because we're having a kid. We're doing this. And that didn't
I'm gonna
happen.
be Mr. Dad.
I'm
Gonna
gonna be I'm
be
gonna be a dad. I'm gonna be a dad. I'm gonna work a 9 to 5. I'm gonna do this.
Shoo!
My life is changed. This is it. And then all of a sudden,
You're
I
like, that's not
realized
me.
I'm not built like that.
No.
That's not me. And so all of a sudden, I started saying, okay, well, I'm just gonna go down these different avenues, things that I've always wanted to do that never had the time or the opportunities to do. And so that's like really where Allison and I sat down and we looked at each other and we said, okay, first off, what do we want our family life to look like? What do we want that change to look like? And we focused on that. And we focused on that for the past 4 or 5 months as my son came into my life. And that's a whole new journey of change. And next thing you know, you realize that besides my career, I'm a very much people person. My social life is massive.
Mm-hmm.
So now I don't have my career that I had in New York. I don't have my social life that I used to have with having a child. And I realized again, these were two areas that I had so much of my identity in.
Mm-hmm.
And so the change is actually just finding myself again and going, okay, who is JC? what does JC want in his family? What does JC want in his next chapter of life? And again, I think shedding off those layers and really getting down to the core of who I am, what I want to do now in my life has been probably the best thing for me. Hasn't been easy. The change has actually been hard. And there's still days where I wake up and I look in the mirror and I'm like, okay, what am I doing? Where am I at in
Who
my
am
life?
I?
Who am I?
What's my name?
What, yeah, what day is it?
Yeah.
But I think sitting in that and being aware and present with that is a good place to be in.
Well, you have
Sometimes
to.
the gray area is the place that we can learn the
We
most
learn the
about
most.
ourselves,
And
right?
it's, they say, like, while you wait for life to pass, life
Mm,
passes.
yeah,
So it's like while we're sitting here waiting for all of these big things to come to us, life is passing. So
yeah,
enjoy those moments that you can be present, because they're going to be gone and life is going to pass. And next thing you know, you're going to have, like, waited 20 years away,
yeah.
you know?
And I think so many times, right? Like we all have the highs and the lows, right? And everybody's been there. We've all had the lows. We've all had, what do they call it? Like the rock bottom moments in our life or in relationships and stuff like that. And then we've all had these highs. We've all had these incredible highs in life. But a lot of times people say, okay, you learn the most at the bottom. Well, yeah, you learn a lot about yourself. And oh yeah, you learn a lot of, but majority of life is in between, right? And I just kind of started to realize that's where I want to learn the most about myself. If this is where I'm at in this gray area of going, okay, I don't know what the next job is going to be. I have an idea and I know what I want the future to look like. I'm going to focus on that and I'm going to focus on the present rather than going, I'm going to focus on the past and focus on what I should have done different or what I could have done different. And I think that's focusing on the unseen
Mm-hmm.
is such like a cool thing, right? Rather than just going, oh my gosh, where am I at? Not stressing about that and just going, okay, this is where I'm at. Where do I want to go? How do I want to get there? And choosing a path that might sometimes feel weird or might not sometimes feel like the right way is sometimes the best way,
Yeah. Where we learn
you
the
know?
most, just like you said. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. Um, okay, so I have a couple random questions to ask.
Hit me with the randoms.
What motivates you to get out of bed in the morning?
My family, my faith, and people. I love people. I want to talk to people. I'm the guy that like finds out if you're an Uber driver or you're the bartender. I want to know so much about you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I've always been. And I think that's what gets me up in the mornings. It's just like, the faith in myself, the faith in like my family and being a dad, and then really like my friends and people.
I feel like that's one of your best qualities. And like something small that I always do is like, it's so easy to do. And it is like, honestly, like not life changing, but it's a very drastic thing to do. Okay. So when you're checking out at the grocery store
Mm-hmm.
and someone hands you your receipt, you look at their name tag and you say, "Thank you, Mike. Have a great
Yep.
day." And
Yeah.
you automatically make that person feel like they are
Mm-hmm.
seen and they are there and they are part of what's
Yep.
going on. They just did something for you. The least you can do is thank them by their name, right? And I
Yeah.
think you're so good at that. You're so good at making people feel seen and heard and appreciated no matter what they're doing. If they're
Yeah.
handing you a bus ticket or if they are serving you a meal. And I think there's a lot to learn from people like you who do so much or do have so much interaction with people, because there's in this world there's just not much of it.
Yeah.
And it is, like you said, it's something that can motivate you to get out of bed in the morning, because it really does make such an impact on your life when you open up your eyes and realize there's other people besides you in your world.
And I also feel like so many people are going through different things in their life. And sometimes people just need somebody to talk to.
Mm-hmm.
And I love to talk. A joke around here is that like I I can talk to a doorknob.
You
You
could.
know what I mean? Like
And have like a really good conversation. Like you could get
yeah,
a lot out of it. You
yeah.
could. Yeah, you'd walk away and be like, listen, I just had the best combo.
And also, I just think that there's so much like, there's so many people in this world, whether they're older than me or younger than me, that it's just like, why not talk to these people?
What's your favorite like okay, I know you have to have a story. Like what's your favorite story of someone you've started a conversation with and it's like run, like it's not changed your life but it's made an impact on you or
So this was a few months ago. Allison was pregnant, and I live in a condo building, and we have a small gym downstairs.
okay.
And um, so, again, I was just dealing with life. I was having a low day, and I was having a hard day of like, okay, what's the next job? How am I going to pay bills? All the stuff that we all deal with in life, and the worry of I have a son coming in. I was just having one of those low days. In the gym, I love the gym. It's my happy place. It's a place that I can go and that I can kind of put my AirPods in and just completely zone out. So I go down to the gym and I turn on some music, and music makes my heart happy. I mean, obviously, I'm a dancer. And so I didn't realize this, but there had been an older gentleman had come into the gym, and he was on the elliptical, and I was down in the gym, and I guess I was just in my zone, and I was just like having a moment. Who knows? May have been singing, may have been dancing. And all of a sudden, I'm just like in the zone. All of a sudden, I feel a tap on my shoulder, or I think he like kind of went like this. I like took my AirPods out, and he said, I just want to let you know that your energy is so awesome. He goes, I can just tell you love life. I was having one of the hardest days of of my month or of my
Right.
week,
Right.
right in that moment. And so in that moment, I took out my AirPods, I put them in, and I said, thank you so much for saying that. I said, I'm actually really having a hard day. And I started a conversation with this man. Next thing I know, this man is in tears telling me that his wife has left him, that he's having the hardest day he's ever had as well. And we sat on the gym floor. Workouts were over for an hour.
Uh-huh.
This man is in his 60s.
Uh-huh.
And I just felt in that moment that I was supposed to have a conversation with this man who was having a hard time. I was supposed to let him know that I was having a hard time. And in that, we were going to find this, not healing, but we were going to find this moment of like, man, we are on two separate journeys. We are on completely separate journeys. And so in that moment, I said, would you like to get dinner with me? Okay.
Did he say no?
No, listen, I
Yeah.
just felt like,
Uh-huh.
would you? And he was like, I would love to have dinner with you.
Oh, okay.
So I said, here's my number. I want you to call me on some day. 3 days later, I'm down at a restaurant having dinner with this guy. And now, like, we'll go have drinks. We'll do this. And it's like, he's found, like, two separate lives. I'm younger, all this. But
I thought
like,
you were gonna tell me. I was like, no, man, I really don't want to hang out with you outside.
no, no,
It's been a great conversation, but like we're gonna
no.
leave it here.
Yeah, but funny story, he did tell me because, I was honest with him. I was like, I'm trying to find work. I'm trying to do this and this. He's like, would you like to open a Taco Bell? I was like, excuse me? He's like, I have a friend that wants to invest in Taco Bell. Would you like to open a Taco Bell? And I was like, I think it's a little different in my world. But
Yeah,
there's so many times in life
the
that
connections are so important.
yeah. And like, I don't see this guy, I don't, like every once in a while I'll see him on the elevator, but like in that moment, I didn't realize how much I needed to just like share. And I don't know if that was any healing for him. I don't know if I said the right things or the right thing or the wrong things. But in that moment, I was like, I didn't want to pour out and do this. I was having a hard day. But in that moment, I walked upstairs and I was like, man, that was awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just try to find those moments, whether I'm at an airport whether I'm at a bar, whether I'm in the grocery store or in an Uber, I just try to find those moments and go, maybe this person needs to talk, or maybe this person doesn't have somebody. And but what I find is I too
Get so
need to
much out of
just
it.
share and
Yeah.
get so much out of it.
Can I really can I really bring this? That was so beautiful. Can I bring it really far down? And can I tell you the other end of that? Like when you start a conversation that you maybe don't want to have.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So years ago, I was on the way to a performance to, I don't know where we were
Right.
going. You weren't on the flight with me, but I must have been meeting you somewhere. And when we used to fly every weekend. So I was the same way. I was like, I love to talk to the person. I'm like, our worlds have connected in this way that we're sitting next to each other on this flight. Like we were
Yeah.
meant to be here. We were meant to have this conversation. Now, if the person beside me had body language, if they didn't want to talk to me, I respected that. I didn't make them talk
Right.
to me. But like a lot of times I had really great conversations, and I really did. So this one time in particular, there was this woman. I know I've told you this, but it's been years, so you probably don't remember. There was this woman, and she was flying back. She had gone to see her daughter who had just had a baby, and she was just like so excited. She was, I mean, you could just tell she was like almost on the verge of tears because she just had the most amazing weekend, and it was her first grandchild, and she was going on and on and on and on and on and on. And I'm like so invested. Like I know all of her kids' names at this point, and I know the grandbaby's name, and like I mean, we're just so like it was so beautiful, right? So she's like, "Oh, do you want to see a picture of my baby?" And I'm like, "Yeah, oh, yes, of course I do, right?" So this is, I mean, back in what, probably 2000,
Yep.
early 2000. So she pulls out her digital camera and she starts showing me pictures of the actual birth experience in the hospital. So she's like, here she is right before she pushed it out. And I'm like, oh my God, that's amazing. And I really
Oh
don't want
my
to see
gosh.
any of this, right? I'm like, can we just skip forward to the actual baby? She's like, oh wait, yeah, we're gonna get there. We're gonna get there. But first I'm gonna show you, like, this is when she was coming out. I mean, like, I didn't know what to do. Like, she
You're
had
like,
felt,
wow.
we had made such a connection that she felt so strong that she knew that I would want to see that. Like, she knew
Yeah.
that, like, I needed to see that to complete the
She's
story.
like,
So,
yeah.
proceed with caution. I'm just saying, if someone brings out their
Oh,
digital camera, put it away. Don't shut it
and
down.
trust me, there's been plenty of
Mm-hmm.
times where I am on a plane and you like sit next to someone and you're like, hey, how are you? And then within the first 5 minutes, I'm like, dang it, I'm gonna have to pretend
Mm-hmm.
like I'm sleeping for
Gotta
this
do
two
this.
and a half hours because, crazy Joe over here
Yeah, good luck.
is, you know what I mean?
Good luck. Okay.
But
Best piece of advice you've ever been given.
best piece of advice that I've ever been given. I mean, I love the let go to fully embrace one,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
but you know, hmm, this is not a best piece of advice. This is
That's
kind of a
okay.
funny.
Whatever you
This is
want.
kind of a well. This is kind of cool. So, I'm going to answer your question. Let go to fully embrace is the best piece of advice I've ever been given. But I remember something when I was a child that changed me, and I and so this is kind of just a quick story. I went on a bike ride to Palo Duro Canyon with my dad. I was probably like 12 years old, and we were mountain bike riding through this whole thing. And I think as a kid, you always trust what your parents say. You're like, should I do this? They either say yes or no, and you trust them.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember there was this crazy like hill that went way down, and at the bottom it was like this light little jump that like went over this stump. So I remember my dad said, "I'm going to go down first, and I'm going to let you know." So my dad goes down on this bike, hits this jump, lands it, and I remember he turns around and he looks up and he's like, and I had yelled down. I was like, okay. I was like, do you think I'll make it? And I remember my dad yelling up to me and goes, I don't know. And I was like, what?
Uh-huh.
Like, what do you mean you don't know? And I was like, what do you mean you don't know? And
Uh-huh.
he's like, well, it's pretty big. But like, I remember in that moment, for the first time, my dad was allowing me to make this decision.
Uh-huh.
My dad was basically saying, you might make it, you might not. And I remember in that split second going, it was almost this huge turning point for me where I was like, okay, I have to make this, I have to make this choice. I have to right here. And I remember him or he said something along, and I'm going to butcher it, but he said something along the lines of, like if you commit, if you fully commit to it and you believe that you can do it, then the outcome doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
And in that moment, I was like, okay, I have to fully commit.
Yep.
Sure, I might wreck. Sure, I might do this. But it wasn't about the result of the jump or the hill. It was really just about of trusting myself, fully committing. And through my whole life, he did that. Like I had a dad that basically was like, hey, go after it. He never asked me about a fallback. He believed in me, but he always told me, fully commit to it, fully commit and trust yourself.
And
And the out
the dots will connect.
and the dots will connect and the
Mm-hmm.
outcome doesn't really matter.
Mm-hmm.
But you just have to fully commit. And that was such a huge thing for me because from that bike ride to my career, I just fully committed into it.
Mm-hmm.
And when I got to the end, I realized if it was the right decision or the wrong decision. And, whether that's work, relationships, life, parenting, you just kind of have to fully commit, trust yourself. And if it's the wrong decision, you'll know.
Mm-hmm.
And then you'll fully commit and trust in the other way.
Yeah, I know, and it's like I always like have this visual of like, and I don't even know where I got it from, but like, it's like if it's meant to be, it'll be, and like, and if, even if it's not meant to be right away, it'll happen eventually. Like all of your steps will connect, and all of your dots will connect, and your path will eventually lead you to where it's supposed to be. And I have this visual of like God almost like as a fly on the wall, like sitting back and like laughing at us, like, girl, you should have listened to me in the beginning. Like laughing at us in those moments that things happen and that things connect and that we trust and we commit and what we've always wanted or that big goal we've wanted when it happens for us. He's like in the corner laughing at us, like in a good way, being like, I told you. Like, why did you? I don't know why you did that to yourself. Like, just laughing, And I don't know why that brings me like a peace of mind almost, knowing that like one day I'm gonna be in that room with him on the wall laughing at me, and I'm gonna be like, okay,
Yeah.
I just think that's
And I
like
think,
that visual.
yeah. And for me, I mean, I am a faithful man, and that's one thing I also believe in. And I always tell people, I'm like, listen, find what works for you.
100%.
Whether that's if it's God, if it's higher power, whatever you believe
Mm-hmm.
in. Just like find that. But I definitely believe there is a will and there is a way for my life. And what has been super cool is just to kind of just understand that in whatever way you want to take that or believe in that. It's like if you trust that there is a purpose, there's a way, there's a will, there's a timing for your life.
Yeah.
If you can trust that, it's
and it's not
so
your
much
timing.
yeah,
By the way,
it's so much easier to just brush off the smaller things.
It is.
And
It is.
I think so much of what we do in our life, right? There's this cool concept that I've heard called a gunny sack is 100 pounds of potatoes.
Okay.
Right? That's how they weigh potatoes. It's called a gunny sack.
I thought it was going to be like a hunting term. I'm like,
yeah.
Oh god,
No,
here we go.
Gunny sack. No. So a gunny sack is basically they say like 10 gunny sacks, right?
Okay.
I think this is going back a long time ago, but everybody carries a gunny sack on their back. Okay. Everybody carries a gunny sack on their back. And what happens is the potatoes are problems, they're issues, they're things that happen in our life, in the past, in the present, they're worries, anxieties, they're all these things. And what happens is so many times what we do is we look at it and we're like, and we throw it in our sack. And then we look at that and we're like, I'm not going to even throw it in our sack. And then what happens is next thing you know, you have no more room. You have no more, you are carrying so much weight that one tiny potato comes. And if it's a person, if it's a job, if it's your spouse, if it's your child, that one potato, you dump that whole sack of potatoes on over that one tiny thing.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the coolest things I've heard is try to address that situation, try to address that problem, try to address that relationship, issue, try to address whatever's going on in your heart or in your brain. As soon as it gets there, before you get it in
Before
your
you pack it
sack,
away. Yeah.
because when you pack it away, it's heavy and it
Mm-hmm.
weighs you down. And then every potato that comes, even though it's the same potato and kind of small, and
And they're
there's
all
bigger
little.
potatoes,
Yeah, they're all
yeah,
like teeny tiny. Yeah.
but it feels so heavy
Mm-hmm.
because it's just, and so when I heard that, I was like, oh my gosh. So now what I try to do, and again, I'm sure my wife is going to watch this and go, "Oh, really? Oh, you're not, you
Don't you
gunny
dare
sacking
talk
me off."
about sweet Allison like that, my
she
girl.
goes, she goes, no, but it's true. So many times I have 10 potatoes in here that have to do with work or
Allison had
my
to
own
leave because
stuff.
she would have been poking her head in every 5 minutes, like, yeah, okay. Let me
Yeah,
make a
yeah,
correction.
she puts her head and she's like, she was like, why don't you take your own advice? I'm kidding. But yeah, it's so true of like, and it, whether it's work, parenting, relationships, whatever it is, they all mix because it's our heart, it's our soul, it's our energy. And so I think so much of that can weigh down just what's happening up in here. And that's why when I don't take care of these things, anxiety shows up, worry shows up, and all these things. And I that's what I've been focusing on lately, of just going, okay, this is a tiny potato. Let me deal with this potato.
Yeah,
You know,
get it over with. Because it's just going to
just do
rot
that.
back
Yeah,
there, right? And then it's going to stink
yeah,
and rot and weigh you down, and it's going to be
yeah,
nasty. Okay,
yeah,
so we have to leave it at that because that was so good. I love that.
yeah.
What is it? Gurney?
Gunny sack.
Gunny sack.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to start this new thing where I want you to give me a
Okay.
question to give my
Okay.
next guest. So you don't know anything about them. You
Ooh,
don't
I
know.
love that.
So
I
give me
love
like
that.
just a question you could ask. Give me a question you would have asked your friend in the gym that day.
A question that I would have asked my
Or just like
friend
a question you like would
that
ask someone
day.
on the street to like that you think is interesting, an interesting something to find out.
You know, I'm gonna stick to kind of what we have been talking about.
Okay.
And I'm gonna say, if you removed what you do for a living, your hobbies, and your relationship with your friends and family, who are you?
Oof.
Who is JC?
Yeah.
Because I think that is the biggest thing. I think so many times we put who we are in other people and what we do and our work and our, all these different areas of our life. And I think one of the things is really asking yourself, who am I without that stuff, is a massive question and one hard to ask.
She's not gonna like this. I know who my next guest is, and she is gonna get so squirmy and uncomfortable. But you know what? If I know her, she's gonna have an amazing answer for this. So that was
I
a good
love that.
question. JC,
Good.
you know I love you. Thank you so
Oh,
much.
you're the best. I just thank you so much for bringing me on and just listening and helping me guide through this. And I just want to say one last final thought. Again, I think if you're listening, remember that when we listen to, I love podcasts, and when we listen to them, everybody feels like they have the right answers and they have this and they have that. But let me remind you, I am in the same place you are right now,
Mm-hmm.
trying to navigate
In the
and
thick of it.
figure
Mm-hmm.
out this life together. So reach out to somebody today, ask somebody a random question, find that Uber driver, and see if you can get a life story out of them.
Just don't ask for pictures.
just don't just don't ask for pictures. Oh my
Okay, so
goodness.
also I'll link people up to like where if they want to watch you on SpongeBob. We've watched it over 456 times in my house because my kid,
Yeah.
they love their Uncle JC, so that we've watched it too many times. But if they want to watch you and then connect with you too, if anyone wants to connect with you, I'll make sure I put everything below in the description for everyone.
Yeah, I'm one of those guys. Please send me DMs.
Slide right on in there.
Slide right on in there. I will send you my number in a non creepy way.
Yeah.
Call me. We'll have a conversation.
And I think we're going to need a part two because we didn't even dive into like what you were kind of. I know you don't even know what you want to do next, but I know you have some really cool ideas. So we'll touch
Yes.
back after your sweet boy is a little bit older and you've had a little bit more
Yeah.
time to sleep and stuff. Because I think right now you're not really sleeping still, are you? No.
We're trying. I think we're going through
Yeah,
the
you're not.
4 month sleep regression right now.
I like that confidence, but you're not.
Yeah. But yes, I always like to say stay tuned, to be continued, because,
TBC.
I am figuring that out as we speak, and
Yeah.
some cool things are on the burner. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, there are. So, yes, 100%. So, thank you, JC, and I'll talk to you soon.
Love you,
Love
Michaela. Thank
you.
you.